Welcome, everyone, to Mega64 Movie Club. The long-awaited episode. The movie you thought, over the entirety of Mega64, people wondered if we would dedicate discussion to this movie. One of us in this group considers it the greatest film of all time.
That's ridiculous. Don't say that. Don't put words in my mouth.
I didn't say who it was.
Oh, no, he was speaking for me.
Sorry.
Acosta.
Yeah.
Because today's film is the greatest film of all time. Will Ferrell's Stranger Than Fiction.
Yep.
Now, I believe Shawn would like to argue that this is not the greatest film of all time.
I could make that argument. I do want to preface, I said it in the last episode, but those of you who missed it, I was nervous suggesting this because I was made fun of so much back in 2006 for saying that I liked this movie.
Yeah. Let's give some backstory.
Yeah, how did that...
And let people in on the joke.
Yeah.
So when this film came out, I saw this in theaters. Shawn saw this in theaters. And I think you made some offhanded remark on an old podcast, Mega64 podcast, that you liked this film.
I did say that.
And that was
back
in... That was in
you
2006.
may have even said you thought it was great. I don't remember.
That sounds like something I could have said. And honestly, I was looking at the movies that came out that year. It could have been like in my top couple movies of the year because that year was whatever for me on movies.
Hey, that year The Prestige came out. That's still my number one.
That's number one, obviously. But I said the top couple. I didn't say it was the best.
Well, you said it was the best movie ever made, so I'm asking you to explain yourself.
The running gag of us saying that Shawn's favorite movie was Stranger Than Fiction. Everybody in Mega64 has a fictitious favorite movie that we like to make fun of them. It's not their favorite movie. We just say it is.
Yeah.
Right.
And Stranger Than Fiction is Shawn's joke favorite movie.
And so it had been so long since I'd seen it, I honestly didn't remember it. And so I said, let's just watch that and get Rocco to watch it. He's going to be mad. And let's see what happens. He made fun of me so much for watching it, he should have to watch it.
So, yeah, we watched it. That's today's episode. Do you guys want to give first thoughts on it?
I can give mine.
Go ahead, Rocco.
Okay.
Shawn, after 14 years of all that mockery, all that jokery about, it's Shawn's favorite movie of all time. All of that. I want to say, well played. You played the long game because you got me back after all these years. I had to sit through this insufferable, dumbass, lame-ass piece of shit movie.
Okay.
Well played.
Wow. Whoa.
No, I didn't.
Harsh
I didn't really
criticism
like it.
from Rocco.
Rocco didn't like it.
Had it. I saw this movie in theaters too, and I barely remembered anything from it. I remember.
Okay, I didn't realize you both
Gyllenhaal
seen
was in it.
Yeah, me too, Derek. I don't remember anything.
I remembered Maggie Gyllenhaal was in this movie. I forgot Dustin Hoffman was in this movie. I forgot Queen Latifah was in this movie. But I generally remembered liking this movie. I feel like this reminded me of like a whole era of films from back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if I necessarily love this film necessarily, but I think it's a view into like what was going on in movies in the mid 2000s.
I completely agree. It is a good window. And honestly, looking at it now, we'll get into the plot in a second, but looking at it now, it was like I didn't like it the way I used to. It was like, honestly, it was like going back to a band I was super into in 2006, where it's like, I see what I liked about this band. I see the songs, I see how it's catchy, but like, it's not like my thing anymore. And that was this movie to me, where it's like, oh, I definitely get why I was so into this then and how I am not so much anymore.
Well, do you want to, do either of you guys want to kind of like run down what the movie's about? Because I feel bad. I have a lot of impressions of that kind of stuff too, but yeah, do you want to kind of like give the gist of what it's about? Maybe people haven't seen it.
Oh my gosh, I don't even have my notes with me. They're in the next room. Let me run and grab those real quick.
Okay, well, in the meantime, that's fine. I will say, Rocco, that as much as you hate it, Roger Ebert, he also reviewed it, and he gave it 3.5 stars. So I don't remember. Is this out of 5 or 4?
Out of 10.
Remember. No, shut up. No, that's not true. Yeah. No, I don't remember what his grading's out of, but
I don't know. May he rest in peace. We'll never know.
Rest in peace, Roger.
Yeah.
Roger Ebert gave it 3.5, huh?
Yeah. He did. But again, Derek, do you remember how many stars is like the best for him? Because I don't remember.
I don't know off the top of my head. 3.5 out of maybe 4, maybe 5. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, whatever. Better than halfway for him. For old Raj.
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's get into Stranger Than Fiction, a 2006 hipster wet dream starring Will Ferrell. That's the best way to describe this movie.
That 100% right. That's absolutely
if you've
right.
never seen Stranger Than Fiction, or if you've never heard of Will Ferrell, we'll give you a quick introduction here. The star Will Ferrell, the star of so many comedies in the early 2000s. You've heard of many of them, I'm sure. Anchorman, Talladega Nights.
Yeah.
He got real famous on SNL originally in the 90s. In 2006, he makes this movie, Stranger Than Fiction, which is, I want to say, maybe his first dramatic role.
I think so.
I can't think of another movie. I'm kind of looking through his IMDb here.
No, I remember at the time thinking like, oh, he's doing something like a little bit different.
Yeah, so this movie, I don't know what you would classify it as, a quirky comedy or maybe like a soft comedy. We can invent a genre, a movie that knows it's a comedy but doesn't focus too much on being funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like a lame comedy. Maybe.
Dramedy? Is that a word? I feel like I've heard that.
I've heard dramedy before. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a dramedy, but then again, it's not very dramatic either.
Yeah, you're right.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
It's kind of just a nothing movie, a genreless movie.
Yeah.
I would even argue that later on in the decade, you guys may not be familiar with this, but there's like a subgenre of movies called mumblecore.
Yeah.
Where people just kind of like don't do anything and talk softly.
Yeah.
This movie almost treads into that genre. Yeah. Not quite, but whatever. Let's get into it. So, Shawn, do you want to do the plot summary or?
Sure. I don't have it written down, but I just watched it. So basically it stars Will Ferrell. He plays Harold Crick, who is just a guy who works for the IRS. He's an auditor. He is the kind of guy, which is kind of interesting. They play it into it a little later, but like he counts all of his steps. He counts his brushes his teeth. He counts, he's just always numbers, always thinking that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, he starts hearing a narrator in his head narrating what he's doing. He's trying to figure out why that's happening. Is he going crazy? He doesn't know. He goes to a psychiatrist. He eventually ends up going to a literary teacher in Dustin Hoffman, who says, well, let's try to figure out what kind of novel you're in. And they kind of try to deduce what's going on. In the meantime, he's also breaking out of his normal patterns, and he starts auditing Maggie Gyllenhaal, and then maybe kind of falling for her, and then she's kind of making him change his ways a little bit, not count his steps.
Yeah, hold on there, because you're speeding through pretty much most of the movie.
I'm like halfway through right now.
Yeah, so, Will Ferrell, Harold Crick, an IRS employee who's, like, obsessed with counting stuff, almost to the point of, like, I don't know what you would say. Almost to the point of, like, something's wrong with him mentally, maybe.
Well, honestly, there's a point in the movie where Dustin Hoffman's like, hey, how many tiles are in the bathroom? Like, because he knows he's counting that shit. But that, to me, was like, oh, that's just a good Rain Man. Yeah. How funny that he's calling attention to that, because he is Rain Man.
That is pretty funny. Yeah, but we should say, too, like, if you haven't seen this movie, all of the plot and comedy moments are so, like, underhanded. And they're really, like, it can't be stated enough how much of a 2006 hipster movie this is.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean that as, like, an insult, but, I mean, they're going for, like, understated comedy that dovetails into maybe, like, a sad, tragic moment, Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like that was happening all throughout the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's very flippant. Like, nothing is very serious in this movie. They're doing like comedy and tragedy about like a guy who has to audit a cookie store.
Right.
It's not super heavy material, and they're trying to really dive into like the deep emotional depths of it, which I think to some people, this movie has a 7.5 rating on IMDb. So I think some people really find this movie very deep, Yeah. It does speak to an audience out there, but
I think honestly the audience, if was me, it was like someone in their early 20s trying to figure out life a little bit, and this movie was like, oh, I just started watching movies, and this one's deep. Even though now I look back on it, it's like maybe it wasn't all I thought it was.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that too, because I find this really interesting because this movie definitely, I agree with you. This movie is for people in their early 20s. I feel like you're not going to like this movie if you're not in your early 20s.
Yeah.
Will Ferrell, though, is like 39 in this movie. The youngest person in this movie, Maggie Gyllenhaal, is 29.
Yeah.
You have like Dustin Hoffman, who's in his 60s.
Yeah.
And I feel like, why were all of these people involved? You know, why are all these people making a movie for somebody in their 20s, right? Who's really behind the direction of this movie? Turns out that this, and we could talk about this later, but the guy who wrote this movie is a little-known writer named Zach Helm, who was 25 when he wrote this film. So, yeah, you keep that in mind when you're watching this. It kind of makes sense. Like, okay, this was written by somebody. He may have even been 24 when he wrote this. Like, real young, hotshot Hollywood writer. Well, I'm not going to say that. I did a little research on him, and he was discovered by like a new writers program in Hollywood. So,
all right.
Anyways, I think that's the reason there's this whole tone throughout the film. Like, this is a very, like, if you're in college, you'll love this movie.
Yeah.
Kind of vibe to it. What did you think about the beginning of the film and the setup of the plot, Rocco?
You know, I don't know. I mean, the opening of it was fine. I mean, I was surprised that he used all the little like graphical things to show all the things he was counting, because that seemed very like comic book movie.
They actually invented that system for this movie. There was like a whole thing that I watched about that.
Really?
Where it's like a lot of those graphics had never been in a movie before this. And
really?
Which you would never in a million years guess they had to invent new technology for Stranger Than Fiction. Yeah. But yeah, there was some graphical thing that they had to develop for this. So
yeah. I wonder what
I don't even know. Yeah, they invented After Effects for Stranger Than Fiction.
No, but yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because it struck me as something like this is a Marvel movie would use this, but yeah.
That's crazy. Like, where did you see that? They invented those graphics or like motion tracking stuff for film?
It was a motion tracking thing, and this is embarrassing because I found this thing. I think it's on the DVD actually, because I do own the DVD. Huh? I do own the DVD. Yeah, so I wanted to get the real story.
Okay. So. All right. Well, that's actually like a claim to fame for this movie. Then they invented supposedly motion tracking for those graphics.
Certain types of motion graphics.
I wish I could remember exactly what it's called, but it doesn't really matter, I guess. But they invented something for it. Yeah.
So that's the setup, and we should say the big hook of this movie is Harold lives a boring life, and there's a narrator, and while he's brushing his teeth one morning, he can hear the narrator narrating his own life. Which freaks him out. He spends a day trying to figure it out, and at the end of that day, the narrator says something cryptic, like little did he know Harold was going to die soon, or something like that. So
yeah,
that's the movie. Will Ferrell must figure out why he's going to die. Can he stop it?
Yeah,
and he goes on a literary pursuit he contacts doctors and literature professors. They try to track down who this mysterious author is narrating his life.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe why I wasn't, again, this is my first time seeing it, and I think why I was kind of, like, not super entertained by it is I feel like there's certain movies that how do I say this? They advertise the premise to you, and you immediately go, oh, so it's about this and this and this and this and this and this, and you kind of, like, envision what that movie could be like in your head, and then when you see the movie, it's like, oh, I've already thought of kind of everything ahead of time that this movie will ever do. Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, oh, he learns he's going to die. Well, I'm pretty sure, like, the trailer had that. You know what I mean? So, like, that's... he's dealing with that until, like, the last 10 minutes of the movie. Oh, if I'm going to die, I mean, should I let it happen? Should I the narrator says I'm going to die. I don't know if I want that and it's like, yeah, I already knew that was going to be a problem. You know what I mean? It's like, you're not staying a step ahead of me. I remember seeing I just want to use the example. I remember watching that movie Teeth with you guys.
Yeah.
Where how do you describe it? A girl has teeth in her vagina. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I say that premise to you, you go, oh, she's gonna bite a dick off. Oh, she's gonna bite some dude's tongue off. Your imagination goes wild, and then you see the movie, and they play those things like surprises.
Right.
And so she bites a dick off in the last 10 minutes of the movie, and it's like, you should have done that in the first 5 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I will say the
similar feeling I have with this movie. That's all I was gonna say is like, I feel like it was dealing with problems I had already kind of thought they would in the beginning versus.
But that seems like more a problem with the marketing of the movie rather than the making of the movie. I mean,
it could be, it could be maybe a trailer doing that, but I don't know. As soon as I hear the narration, I think like, well, he's going to have to deal with serious shit. Like what's going to happen if there's physical harm coming to him? And
I found it interesting,
the whole movie. Yeah.
What I thought the movie did well is making a plot out of, trying to actually hunt down who this author is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like Shawn was saying in the plot description, he goes and he meets Dustin Hoffman, who is a college professor, a literature professor. Mm. Pretty much everybody thinks Harold Crick is crazy, but he's able to convince this professor by reciting the narration that maybe this is actually an author, somebody with like a literature background narrating his life. And I like that Dustin Hoffman creates a questionnaire to like interview Harold to try to figure out like, who is the author? Is this a book that's already written? Is this a book that exists, doesn't exist? Are you in Frankenstein? Are you in a comedy or a tragedy? And that's basically kind of what the second act is about. Mm-hmm. They whittle it down to, we don't know what kind of book you're in, so let's just figure out comedy, you live, tragedy, you die. Is there a girl in your life? And so he starts pursuing Maggie Gyllenhaal, the owner of the bakery that Harold Crick is auditing for his job at the IRS. That becomes like the love subplot of Stranger Than Fiction.
Yeah.
Which is the whole second act. I guess we can like talk about that now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, basically, there's a couple tense scenes with them, but eventually he breaks through and they become friends and then become a little bit more than friends. And then they kind of he like makes a move on her, which he never would have done, but he heard that he was going to die, so he wants to make his life better before he dies. Yeah. And then which I thought there was some things in this movie that like looking still, I'm like, that is still a cool shot. Like the shot of them on that bus and like they're on different sections of it and it's moving so differently. I thought that was a really cool, it just looked cool to me.
There are a lot of cool filmmaking things in this movie. For the most part, I feel like actually my biggest problem with this movie is the whole Maggie Gyllenhaal subplot, because I never felt like that was real or that really worked. The whole time I'm like, what is Maggie Gyllenhaal?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, can I just say this is probably the best, cutest version of Maggie Gyllenhaal in any film ever. I'm going to go on record and say.
Okay.
No,
2006.
Dude, Dark Knight when she fucking explodes. Oh, gotta disagree, bro.
She's very like
Kaboom.
Punk rock, anti-establishment. I'm this baker rocker chick. She's very cool in this movie. What does she see in Will Ferrell, the quiet IRS guy?
Right.
That never makes sense to me over the course of the whole movie. It just seems like out of nowhere, she starts like throwing herself at him.
When she starts making out with him, it's like no one has ever once done that to Will Ferrell ever.
Yeah, and Will Ferrell picks her up with the most like creepy lines. He comes with a bunch of like flower seeds at one point and goes, "I want you."
Yeah.
I've decided
like a robot.
Yeah. I shouldn't do this, but I want you. And she's like, I want you too. All into it. Yeah, whatever. It totally took me out of this movie. I was like, this is like the biggest hipster wet dream fantasy. Like, oh, I'm nerdy and I'm good with numbers and I misunderstood. Will Ferrell also secretly loves punk rock in this film. That's the thing they kind of subtly bond over, though it's implied and never really stated.
Yeah.
That's the second act, and to me, it's not like none of it works. It's just not believable, in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah, the Maggie Gyllenhaal thing never really worked for me, and she's like some like anarchist who like purposely doesn't pay her taxes all the way because she doesn't want to fund wars. And it's like, oh, this is something that people were saying when Bush was in office. This is like, I don't know. Yeah. That didn't really work.
I feel like that was a lot of movies in this era, though. The early 2000s, I feel like there were a lot of them that would tell these big stories, and the ending of them would always be, but I love her. But I found her. And it just kind of got like, I don't know. It felt like that was leaned on a lot. I don't know if I'm even making any sense. Maybe that's a lot of movies, even not in that era, but
sure.
I just felt like a lot of them at that time were just like, oh, they went back to that.
Yeah. So basically, in the third act, I'll wrap it up. He ends up finding the narrator and author who's writing her book, and then she's
conveniently, we should say,
so convenient.
Yeah. Can we describe the scene? He's with Dustin Hoffman. Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to find her. I don't think it's possible. Then he sees her on TV. That's her. And Dustin Hoffman goes, well, that can't be her. That interview is 10 years old. Why was he playing a 10-year-old interview on a TV in his office?
That made no sense. No, it made no sense. You never saw that TV before. It's not like he was always watching shit. It was just happened to be on. Like, they had so many things, Dustin Hoffman, like, he was always moving, always drinking coffee, always, getting more coffee and then drinking that. It's like, and you never once saw him with a TV or anything like that. So it was so like, well, where did this come from?
Yeah. Imagine being in the room when you wrote that moment. Like, okay, we've gone through everything. They just can't find this author. Okay, now how do we really find her? Oh, she's just on TV at that moment in the background, randomly.
Randomly.
Yeah. So that's how the movie goes. Yeah.
Yeah. So then he finds the author. She's freaked out. She wrote an ending that kills him because she kills all of her characters at the end. And he tries to convince her not to kill him. And then she ends up giving him and Dustin Hoffman the book. They both agree that he needs to die because the book, that's the best ending, is for him to die. Then basically the ending happens where a kid falls in front of a bus, and then he saves the kid. He gets hit by that bus and then is dead until you find out later that she changed the ending and he is not dead. And
spoiler alert. That's how it ends.
That's how it ends. So.
And I remember even in 2006 watching this is what kind of ruined the movie for me. This whole attitude of Will Ferrell reads his own life story, and Dustin Hoffman, this literature professor, reads the story too. And they both agree it's the greatest, most groundbreaking masterpiece of American literature written in the last 100 years. And it has to, we have to go through with it because it would be a crime to deny the American people this work of art.
Yeah.
You're like, okay. And it's a kid who rides his bike in front of a bus and Will Ferrell jumps in front of the bus to save him.
Yeah.
Like, talk about
life-changing,
smelling your own fart, like self-serving attitude. Like, the movie you're watching is actually a story about creating the greatest story ever made. So hold on to your butts for this one.
And I did think that, like, the ending, how it really ended, they keep mentioning his wristwatch, which that part I hated when it was like describing how I can't say that, I'll say the watch, how the watch was feeling. It's like, oh, it loved the air on his face. It's like, ew, what the fuck? That's stupid.
Yeah, it's implied that his wristwatch is like sentient and alive and like an emotional character in this story. But it's only implied. It's never really like, I guess it is kind of stated, but
they just mentioned that watch 1,000 times. And then in the end, the watch, when it gets hit by the bus, like it's like a part of it gets lodged in his arm and like ends up saving his life, and that's forever embedded in his arm is his watch.
Yeah, and maybe the watch is alive. Who knows?
Maybe, but to me, it's like, well, that ending, whatever you may think of it, makes more sense in the course of the book that I saw than just get hit by a bus at the end. Like, I don't know.
Well, okay. Here's a major thing I feel is like pretty characteristic of this whole movie. You mentioned earlier that Will Ferrell likes to count stuff obsessively. Yeah. By the end of the movie, he doesn't anymore. He's changed. He's like more free or whatever. And it's cool on paper. Like, you should have a main character who has these character traits and they go through this whole arc and they change at the end of their story. but it just felt like it wasn't believable, you know? Like, yes, he's changing, but I didn't believe it. And the same thing with the watch. Like, the watch is supposed to save his life. It's supposed to be an integral part of the story. It shows up every once in a while in the movie. It does serve its role on paper, but it just doesn't have like the emotional heart. Like, it just doesn't feel like it works. And I don't know why, but that's kind of like the whole, like, everything wrong with this movie is like, I mean, that's the formula. You're doing it right, but it's not connecting for whatever reason.
I kind of feel like, honestly, I really do like this idea as a whole. Like, it's interesting to me that, guy's life is all of a sudden being narrated and he has to figure out what's happening. That's an interesting idea. Kind of maybe a little Twilight Zone-y, a little bit. But I just feel like maybe if it had one more revision of a draft, like one more draft of this script.
I felt this movie was missing a little bit of, like, honestly, all right, this is what it is. The movie's too smart for its own good.
Yes.
It's missing a little bit of, like, stupidity. It's a little too highbrow. I was reading the trivia about this movie, and one of the things that struck me is, like, every single character in this movie is named after, like, some famous scientist or mathematician. Like, Harold Frick is named after the person who discovered DNA. The author, her last name is Eiffel, the engineer who made the Eiffel Tower. You know, Maggie Gyllenhaal, her last name is Pascal. Like, they're all named after scientists and mathematicians.
Okay, I didn't realize.
Yeah, there's so much of that in this movie that you would never know. So many references to, like, really smart philosophical things that, you know, dudes like us, we're pretty smart, but we're not geniuses. We miss a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, but I also feel like that is something that someone who is just out of college who thinks they're super smart would write and put in the movie.
This movie is so intellectual. It's so in your brain. It's written by a 25-year-old, maybe genius. I don't know, but it's missing kind of like the heart and like stupidity, I think.
Yeah. I want to be fair as fair though, because I know I'm going to take heat for this. Lost is one of my favorite shows of all time, and I do recognize that they named people John Locke.
Right.
And, you know, so
all
I just want they did it too.
Let me give you I think this will be interesting.
Okay.
The movie's called Stranger Than Fiction. And there's this quote from Mark Twain, this famous quote, and it says, "Of course, the truth would be stranger than fiction, because fiction needs to make sense." Mm-hmm. That's the quote, right? Like when you're writing a story, it all needs to add up. It all needs to, you need to connect the dots. Yeah. But in real life, sometimes when real things happen, it doesn't make sense. It's unexplainable. Sometimes there's this whole part of the world that's just like the gut.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't have enough of that. It doesn't have enough of that, like, hey, it doesn't fucking make sense. As much as I love for things to add up and make sense, this movie was like too intellectual, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my general final summation of Stranger Than Fiction. I don't know what you guys think or if you agree.
Yeah. I personally, this movie I don't mean to sound like such a, you know, asshole about this whole movie, whatever, but it just represents that era of movies to me. And I was talking to Shawn about this the other day. I just don't think a lot of that era ages well. You know, it's just kind of, I don't know, the early 2000s, there's very few that came out of that unscathed. Or maybe they're just not old enough yet to be cool. You know, maybe they will be, but yeah, it's just kind of this, I don't know, it's not really committal to anything like you were saying before. It's like, it's not comedy enough and it's not drama enough. It's just this kind of mumbly thing. And I'm just going to speak for myself. That era was like my least favorite time of movies because you had stuff like this. You had stuff like Garden State where I was just like, dude, curb this. Like, give me more like UHF. Like, give me something fucking nutty. Go that far or go real dramatic. I just felt like the early 2000s had this middle ground stuff that was just not doing it for me. So that's what, I don't know, it kind of represented that to me. I left it just kind of like, okay, yeah. I agree with you. It should have gone, it needed a little more chaos in it or stupid stuff as you put it.
I think every era has good movies and bad movies.
Sure.
I think this movie, and here's the thing, some eras have movies that you think are good.
Yeah.
And then you revisit them later turns out they were bad.
Well, that's what I was just saying to Shawn. Is I've rewatched a few movies from that era recently that I loved, and I'm watching them and I'm like, oh man, like I used the example. Don't get me wrong, I like the movie Gladiator, I still do. Yeah. But even that, when I rewatched it the other day, I'm like, this is still a painfully early 2000s movie. You know, again, I still like it, but it doesn't. That was supposed to be the best of the best back then, and it was still just like, all right, you know. I don't know. For me, I'm not saying like there was nothing but shit at that time or anything like that. But for me, that was a difficult era for movies where, I don't know, a lot of them didn't.
Well, I believe movies, you know, like all art forms, they kind of reflect what's going on culturally.
Yeah, exactly.
Gladiator in that era was very like, yeah, let's fucking kick all their fucking asses.
Yeah.
And honestly, movies like Stranger Than Fiction were like a reaction to that.
Yeah.
Movies like Stranger Than Fiction said, you don't need a movie where you fucking kick everybody's fucking ass.
Yeah, you're right.
Sometimes an accountant can just fall in love with a baker, and that can be a movie.
You're right. And even like, you know, I talk shit on Garden State, but again, like that came after a whole wave of that. You know, maybe it was a post 9/11 thing where it felt like everything had to be real, like, you know, and then maybe we needed something like Garden State where it's like, yo, can a boy or a girl just cry? You know, like, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we needed that.
It's always important to look at like when a movie was made. That will inform a lot about, you know,
exactly
kind of what the people behind it were thinking, and maybe it's a snapshot into the world at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying,
I'm happy we don't live in the Stranger Than Fiction world anymore.
Yeah, me too. Movies are better now. I do think I did like this, Rocco, because of what you're saying though, because that was one movie that was quiet. Mm-hmm. Everything else was so loud. And I was just like, I just needed a second just to, I have feelings. Let me watch that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, again, I'm just speaking for my own personally. That wasn't my favorite era of movies, but I do see why it existed and why maybe it meant a lot to people. Like, yo, you've got all this going on. Please just, maybe I need an exhale from that. So I get it. I get it.
You know, I want to say too, not anything to do with that, but this movie came out in 2006, the same year as Talladega Nights, and
that was the same year. Oh wow, yeah.
And Curious George. Will Ferrell had 3 years in 3 movies in 1 year, so busy year for Will Ferrell.
Yeah. And Talladega Nights. I mean, I know this. You know, this isn't a video game show, but we are kind of based in video games. Talladega Nights is still my favorite pack-in video game with a console ever. The PS3 coming with the Blu-ray of that was just a masterstroke. I remember when they announced, there's going to be because Blu-rays were still a new thing. Like, a movie in HD is going to come with the PS3. And I remember thinking like, it'll be like Spider-Man or, you know, because that's what Sony owned that. Like, that'll be a good like show off of Talladega Nights. Okay.
Good luck watching that. I tried to revisit that weeks ago. I couldn't even get through like 20 minutes. It was so bad. Yeah. You might be right, actually, Rocco. 2006 might be the worst era of films.
It's rough. But I still do like the Prestige. I still do like the Prestige and Children of Men. I do like those.
Yeah, those are the two that kind of
hold on. It's been a while since I've watched those movies.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the Prestige like a month ago. Still great.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still
hasn't
good.
aged. Children of Men I've not seen.
There's a little. I was just gonna say with the Prestige. I will be fair and I will say there's still a little early 2000s residue there.
Yeah.
But it's still a good movie. Still a cool movie.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I think that wraps us up for today. Stranger Than Fiction. We put a bow on it.
Yeah. What's your popcorn shaker count, Derek?
I would give it 2 out of 5. Okay. 2.5 out of 5. Yeah. 50%.
I at one time would have been I would say a 3.5 to 4 shakers, but now a little gray in the beard later, I'm going to say I give it 2.5 with you. 2.5 shakers.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with this movie, but there's not really
it
that
could
much that's right with
still
it.
be my favorite Will Ferrell performance because I don't really care for his movies. And he's so obnoxious, and this is the most quiet he's ever been, and I kind of
Like
liked
his
it.
only dramatic film, almost.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a movie that I liked him more in, and I don't know if I can. He's very likable in this movie, for me.
What about you, Rocco?
I think for me, again, this is just my personal context. I would always rather a movie be unabashedly stupid and know it is. Like, as much as I bagged on Zohan, they knew what they were making. And it was purely that, you know? I would rather have a movie do that than have this thing and think it's all deep and like, oh, didn't we affect you with this thing and fail, you know? So this is a one. A one is being generous for me. I just can't get into that kind of. I don't know. You gotta like take a huge risk or go stupid. What's that?
Did you like Zohan more than this?
I never thought I would say that, but yes. But again, Zohan at least was stupid and knew it and embraced it. I just can't stand this middle of the road thing. You're gonna
come around on Zohan the more you think about it.
You know what? You did say that once on an older podcast. You said you were like, you know what? Rocco always comes around. And I was thinking about that the other day because I remember how many years I said I shit on Kiss, and then I was ironically watching their interviews, and then I've like listened to all their albums now, and I'm like, yeah, he was fucking right. I'm listening to fucking Kiss now. What the fuck is wrong with me? So,
hey, there is one more thing I want to bring up, a piece of trivia that I saw, which I didn't put it together when I saw this in the movie, but it made sense the second I read it. The two guys who are always asking him for problems, like, hey, what's 1,400, whatever. Those two guys are the Sonic guys who are in the fucking car.
What?
In every Sonic commercial.
What?
They're together in that movie.
What?
And let me say, I also read that piece of trivia, and I never realized the guys in the Sonic commercial were the same two people every Sonic commercial.
Yeah. Yeah. You care that little.
Sonic commercial guys. I just thought those were random people every time.
I'm so tired of those guys. No offense
Me
to them.
too. Me too. But how weird that they're together in this movie as like a duo. That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
Was that like
it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship?
I guess so. Anyways, that's my last piece of trivia from this movie. Well, thank you everyone for watching. What is next week?
You know, I am going to suggest for next week we visit a movie that none of us have seen, but we've all heard about many times. The legendary film Magic Mike. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. And let me tell you, people, there will be gyrating.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, yes.
And we're not talking about the movie.
Mm-mm. I've heard that's good. I've heard it.
I heard that too.
Oh, it's real good. Yeah. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching Mega64 Movie Club.
Keep on
We'll
gyrating.
catch you next week.
Dude, it should be our first nude review.
Okay.
Who's in? I'm going to turn the mic on or the camera on that day, and we're just going to see who did it.
Okay.
All right.
You're going to be in for a
surprise. See you then, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Boy.
No.